So, what defines good horror? I think this is one of the most subjective kinds of media out there. There's a lot of different kinds of horror. People can want different things from horror. Maybe they want suspense, maybe they want jump scares, maybe they want a good story, maybe they want a period piece, maybe they want something modern, maybe they want, there are so many different avenues you can go down with horror. So today I'm going to be talking about, for me, possibly the absolute pinnacle point of what I like in horror. This is The Haunting of Hill House. It's a new series that popped up on Netflix. I posted up on Twitter asking if anyone had seen it, and it got some good responses. People seem to like the show, so I thought, hey, it's sooty. So I thought, hey, let's check it out. And that's what I did. Hi. Hello, Sooty. This is my little Salem. You're quite comfy there, Sooty. You're a silly cat. A very silly cat. So, I checked it out, and we're going to be talking today about exactly what I think makes this, if not the best horror series on Netflix, but the best horror series of all time. Please do leave a like if you enjoy, and subscribe if you want to help support me and little Sooty here. Let's do it. So, The Haunting of Hill House is a drama horror mystery show. It features 10 parts, and each part is a slightly different length. Some will be over an hour, some will be under an hour, depending on exactly what's going on in that episode. It's created by Mike Flanagan and features Michiel Huisman. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's from Game of Thrones and he plays Stephen Crane. We have Carla Gugino as Olivia Crane, Henry Thomas as young Hugh Crane, Elizabeth Reeser as Shirley Crane, Oliver Jackson Cohen as Luke Crane, Kate Siegel as Theodora Crane, Victoria Pedretti as Nell Crane, Lulu Wilson as young Shirley, McKenna Grace as young Theo. And we go on. There's a lot of characters, basically. A lot of characters. But there are a lot of characters. But the reason for there being so many characters is because this is a very weird series in terms of the time frame that it's set in. It goes back and forth between past and present a lot. It's basically the story of a haunted house, and it's about a family of kids that lived there and the horrible stuff they witnessed, and then they grow up, go their separate ways, but are brought back together when one of the family decides to once again visit the house. Now, I love the way that it goes back and forth between past and present. I think it's a very clever way of doing things, and the editing is absolutely superb with this. The way it connects the past points and the present points is very, very clever and very well done. I will say, watching the first episode, I was a bit put off by this because I didn't know what was happening at all. I really couldn't get a grip of why we were seeing the house in a new state and an old state and why it was going back and forth, but you get used to that like pretty much through the second episode. Now, this series has an incredibly emotional backbone to it. It's very sad, it's very dark, it's very depressing. There is a huge focus on death, especially within the first few episodes. It really heavily focuses on death and how we handle it, and I find that kind of stuff really interesting. I think it's an interesting topic to explore. There's a lot of depth to it, there's a lot of different opinions on it, so I like that a lot. When it comes down to the actors' performances, yeah, pretty much incredible all around. Some of the best performances I've seen from most of these actors. It's really brilliant. There is a really cold dynamic between the whole family. There's a lot of hatred going on, a lot of anger, and I think that kind of dynamic it's interesting. It's really interesting to see how each of the characters handles the situations that they're put into. So one of the characters is a drug addict and has led a really tough life since leaving the house because I guess he doesn't really know how to handle the things that he saw. I thought that was really interesting, and it was actually done pretty well. It was pretty accurate to like addiction and how rough it can be, so I liked that element a lot. So a lot of you are probably thinking, well, how scary is this series? My mum started watching it, and she said that she couldn't watch it at night time. She had to start watching it in the daytime, if at all, because of how scary this series is. And I'll be honest, it's probably the scariest series I've ever watched. It has some really, really frightening moments and is done in a very clever way. There are some nice jump scares, but those jump scares are built up by very atmospheric, suspenseful and chilling moments. And I loved it. I thought it was really, really terrifying in a lot of moments. There are a lot of really interesting characters, some interesting ghosts that have some wonderful designs and really interesting ideas behind them, such as the bent neck lady, and we have this rather tall guy that has a cane and a top hat, or a bowler's hat, and he sort of floats as he moves around using his cane to push himself forward. I think some of them are really fascinating. I love them. I think the house is goddamn beautiful when it wants to be, but cold and terrifying in other moments. The house becomes definitely a character all in itself. It really does. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about the anatomy of a house. You know, you have the heart of a house, you have the face of a house, etc, etc. And I think that's explored in a really interesting way. The house acts in a similar way to, say, the house in Layers of Fear, the way that it sort of changes depending on how it wants to, depending on what it wants to show you or how it wants to make you feel. And I like that. I think that's a really interesting concept. I would even go as far as saying that The Haunting of Hill House is scarier than most horror films I've ever seen, like by a long shot, and that's really rarely the case. It's very rare for a horror series to be scarier than some of the best horror films. Now, one thing that makes this the case is the subtlety, the clever scares. That's what I love. Jump scares, fine, it startles me, but it doesn't leave me feeling like, oh my god, did I really just see that? It kind of plays with your head. Now, I think the way that the house plays with the minds of the characters in the series, it also starts to play with the mind of you, the viewer, because there are lots of hidden ghosts and secrets and little Easter eggs in this series, and those are the most frightening moments for me. When I'm watching it with Cassie, I'll be like, oh my god, did I just see that? And we'd have to rewind and notice that there's a really creepy person in the background, and there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that throughout the film, but those, I like subtle scares, I really do, because I think they're the most frightening, when you feel like your mind has been tricked, that sort of thing. I think that's fantastic. Sorry if I'm leaned back a bit, I have a cat on my lap. So, another fantastic aspect is the music. There are some wonderful pieces of music, and they are used very, very well in the right moments to create incredibly emotional scenes. There's a specific piece of piano music that I just love. I absolutely adore it, and it's used in a wonderful way as well. Now, getting on to what made this series really stand out for me are some of the technical aspects. We have the camera work, which is just superb. It's really brilliant. There's one episode where most of the episode takes place in one area, and you have the whole family there, and they're all talking and arguing amongst each other, but there are these really long single takes that I think are absolutely fantastic. You have the camera moving fluidly throughout the room, panning around all of the different characters all in one shot, and I think that takes a lot of talent to pull it off well, when you have all of these different characters moving around, all of them talking amongst each other, and the camera's flowing through all of them in a very natural way. It's just excellent, and this is the case for quite a few of the episodes. Like I said before, the editing is absolutely fantastic, especially when you're cutting between the past and present. It is done in a very natural, fluid way where you can understand exactly what's going on. It's just a very well made series all throughout. Nearly all of the aspects are pretty much superb. So, is there anything I don't like about this series? Some very minor things, yeah. Some very, very tiny minor things. One thing it's barely even a real negative, but it does it does get a bit suffocating in how dark it is and how much anger there is between the characters. I also feel that some characters could have had a bit more depth. Some characters had a lot of depth and there was huge developments going on, huge character developments, but other characters didn't get as much development, they didn't get as much depth, but that's again not so much of a problem. I think that certain characters needed to be focused on a lot more than some of the others. I think there are some wonderful elements to it. It shows how metaphorical some of these ghosts are, how a lot of these ghosts are actually part of the own character's psyche, their own consciousness, their own regrets and stuff they've repressed. And I think that's really interesting. It's an interesting way of doing things, and one of the characters, Stephen Crane, even says that it's not just houses that are haunted, it's also people can be haunted. And I love that element. I'm getting back onto things I like, aren't I? But yeah, there's some really interesting metaphorical stuff. However, some of the ghosty stuff did get a bit much in the last few episodes. It started getting maybe a bit silly. I don't know. I don't really know how to formulate what I want to say about this. I'm really struggling to think of things I dislike about this series. So, just to make things easier, I think I'm going to leave it there. I love this series. I think it's absolutely fantastic. You can watch it now on Netflix. There's 10 parts, as I've said. Each part is as good as the next. It just builds and builds and builds, and you fall in love with the characters. You find that even though they're quite flawed characters, you can still find a lot of relatability in them. So that was my review on The Haunting of Hill House. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed. If you did, please do leave a like and subscribe if you want to help support me and my content. Thank you very much, guys. I will see you in the next one. Take care now.